three-day ASEAN Summit is underway in Cambodia. This is the first in-person meeting of the grouping since the COVID-19 pandemic began in 2020. This is day 2 of the summit, which began on Friday. US President Joe Biden has thanked Cambodia's Prime Minister for his stand on the Ukraine war. Biden said he was looking forward to democracy returning to the army-ruled Myanmar. The remarks made by the US President come ahead of his meeting with the Cambodian Prime Minister. Biden is also meant to meet with the Asian heads of state who are gathered at the summit to discuss a range of issues including Myanmar, China and North Korea. Meanwhile, the Australian Prime Minister met with the ASEAN leaders and welcomed East Timor's membership to the bloc. This comes after the ASEAN leaders agreed in principle to admit Timor-Leste as its 11th member.
Welcomes ASEAN leaders in principle agreement to admit Timor-Leste to be the 11th member of ASEAN. As Timor-Leste's largest development partner, Australia is committed to providing capacity building to support its full ASEAN membership.
The leaders of China, Japan and South Korea also held talks with the South Asian nations' leaders.
The
bloc earlier held talks with the Chinese premier.
我们正在磋商 COC， 在磋商过程当中，我们照顾各方的关切，但是也坚决地维护和促进国际法，尊重包括联合国海洋法公约在内的国际法，支持依据包括公约和南海各方行为宣言在内的国际法原则，来妥善处理南海出现的一些问题。
Meanwhile, South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol said the unilateral attempts to change the status quo in the Asian region by force can never be accepted. He further said he would strengthen the shared economic prosperity based on an open and fair order.
또 태평양 지역의 평화와 안정은 우리의 생존과 번영에 직결됩니다.
The 10-nation bloc faces a multitude of issues, including the escalating crisis in Myanmar. Now, during day 1 of the summit, the Southeast Asian heads of government issued a warning to Myanmar, asking it to make measurable progress on a peace plan or risk being barred from the bloc's meetings. The Southeast Asian leaders also agreed to engage Myanmar's opposition groups. The bloc leaders are now seeking ways to quell the country's escalating bloodshed, which has seen thousands killed in clashes since last year's coup. Political, social and economic chaos have gripped Myanmar since the military overthrew an elected government led by Aung San Suu Kyi last year. On the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba held a news conference where he called on the South Asian countries to take all measures possible to ensure that Russia does not play hunger games regarding the shipment of Ukrainian grain to the global market.
I called on all ASEAN members to take every measure possible to stop Russia from playing hunger games with the world. Grain corridor should be exempted from the conflict. Whatever happens on the battleground, Russia should not use this corridor as a blackmail, as a leverage in international relations.
For more on this, we are now joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibul. Siddhant, how exactly should this meeting be viewed, especially given the kind of warnings that have been given to the military junta in Myanmar? Clearly, the ASEAN bloc taking a tough stand here. Also, a series of some very important bilaterals taking place on the sidelines of this summit.
Well, the meetings which are underway right now in Cambodia are significant, essentially, given that they are coming in the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Chinese aggressive actions, and of course, Cambodia is playing host to a number of world leaders, including, of course, the Indian Vice President, the US President Joe Biden. Just a short while ago, spoke at the meeting, the ASEAN-US summit level meeting. This is a sectoral meeting or sectoral summit level meeting which ASEAN has already had earlier today with India, with China and with Japan. But essentially what the US President Joe Biden said was that Washington stands with ASEAN in terms of any support, announcing, of course, the conversation on South China Sea and Myanmar with ASEAN, and also, of course, the assistance for 2023. But largely, if we look at what is expected to transpire, is that the East Asia Summit that's going to take place on Sunday is going to perhaps define how the ASEAN centrality, which all the countries in the region, whether it's India, China, Japan, or outside of the region, have been emphasizing on, is protected and is something that when it comes to walking the talk happens. So largely Cambodia, of course, leads to the G20 summit as well, which happens here in Bali, Indonesia.
All right. Certainly an interesting precursor there to that all-important G20 summit that you're going to be covering for us in Bali. Thanks very much, Siddhant, for getting us all those details.